Badowski of WeAreChange.org, and I'm here with Ben Swann of benswann.com at the Austin Bitcoin Conference. Now, Ben is an independent journalist. He's been doing a lot of great stuff. Truth in Media, your project, has just started this week. You just released your first story. What was it about?
Yeah, we're doing a piece on impartisanship. It's a lawsuit that's actually going out against the Republican and Democratic parties and the fact that in their primaries across the country are closed primaries, but taxpayers are having to pay $400 million in order to pay for those primaries, but then they're locked out of them if they're not a part of that system. Yeah. Remember this, that about 48% of the country right now is unaffiliated with either Republicans or Democrats as registered voters. So that means half of the registered voters in the country can't vote in primaries that they have to pay for. So that's what the lawsuit's about. That's the piece that we put together, kind of explaining that process.
See, this is what I like about independent media. It's not left, it's not right.
That's right.
It's totally free of any political leaning
that's
or
what
corporate.
we're trying to break, right?
Exactly.
We're trying to break this left-right paradigm.
Which brings me up to my next topic is Ukraine, because I found it extremely difficult to cover because there's so many different sides, and it seems like people in the mainstream media and also independent media pick one side. And I think both sides suck. Putin sucks, Obama sucks, and I feel like we're just stuck in this ideology and people feel safe. I mean, I released an article that was talking about how bad Russia was, and everyone jumped on me saying I worked for the State Department. I released another article saying how hypocritical the US is and how they're influencing the region and how they're manipulating the situation, and everyone said I'm Putin's son. Stop saying that. I know who you are. Which is understandable, which is fine. All right.
Actually, hold on. Look at this guy for a second. I can kind of see it. Putin's he's a tough guy, though. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Doesn't mean that you're supporting him, though. You could be the prodigal son. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What are we talking about?
Ukraine and the situation in Ukraine. So I'm here with Barbie doll Ken here, reporting live on the situation in Ukraine. No, in all seriousness, how do we, as journalists, cover such a topic when the people out there and all the other journalists out there are picking just one side?
Well, that's the problem, is that journalists are picking a side, and I think a lot of it isn't from the journalist point of view. I think it's from the viewers. I think the viewers want them to pick a side, right? Because it's almost embedded in our DNA, this cosmic battle between the USA and Russia, right? It's all Rocky IV, and so we're all obsessed with this idea of like, this is the good guy and this is the bad guy, and so you need to pick a side. And it doesn't matter what the United States has done. It doesn't matter that we're drone striking in Somalia and Pakistan and Yemen and Mali, got troops over North Africa, we're in Iraq, we're in Afghanistan, we're spread out all over the world. Doesn't matter because Putin crossed the border into Ukraine, and so they're the bad guys and we're the good guys, right? It's just bred into our DNA. And then on the other side of it, you got folks who were saying like, well, okay, the Russians have the right to be there and they have this treaty with Ukraine that allows them to have 25,000 troops in Crimea. The treaty doesn't say you can come in there and surround a military base and not allow any of the Ukrainian soldiers to either come or go, okay? So to make that argument is pretty weak. Look, as a journalist, you want to cover what's happening. You want to explain the situation without taking a side, but also recognizing that both sides are wrong, and at the end of the day, whether it's the EU that prevails and ultimately brings Ukraine into the EU and forces them into a fiat money system with the IMF, or it's Russia that wins and tries to basically take Ukraine back into the old Soviet Union, either way, the Ukrainian people lose. We have this thing we're saying at benswann.com now, humanity is greater than politics. This is a great example of that. The humanity of the people who live in Ukraine, ultimately they're the losers because politics will win out.
Ultimately, they're picking their dictator. They're picking their ruler, which makes no sense at all. But it's also difficult from a journalistic point of view because there's so much information just out there on the internet, and I feel like some people nitpick different articles. Sure. My kind of strategy is let's pick out both sides. Let's show how they're hypocritical. Let's show how the IMF is pumping money in there to put them into another Greek-style slavery system. But let's also talk about how messed up the Russians are and what they're exactly doing. So I try to cover both angles, but again, we're still being...
hopefully covering it from the point of view of the people, right? Exactly. Ultimately, what is good for the people? And by the way, the people of Ukraine have different views on that. I mean, the eastern part of the country, they want Russia there. They want Putin to come in. In the western part of the country, they obviously don't. And so the people are not as simple as saying 100% of the people want one thing or another. And that's never the case. And that's the complexity of covering this issue without it falling into kind of its own left-right paradigm.
Exactly. Which brings me to my next question with what's happening with RT. We have Abby Martin who went off and said she finds what Russia did irreprehensible. And then we have Liz Wall yesterday just quitting on air. What kind of effect do you think this is going to have on media in general?
Well, I think it's an interesting effect. I think for a long time people have been weary of RT. There are some folks, look, RT does amazing work. And if you watch RT, and I know you do, and I do, as someone who watches that, you see some really great reporting on subjects that you're not going to get from U.S. media. At the same time, I think Liz Wall, if she felt that was what she needed to do, and she believes that RT is whitewashing, as she said, Putin's actions, and she has every right to do that. I would have liked to have seen her explain a little bit that statement, right? Yeah. Explain, what do you mean by whitewashing Putin's actions? Can you give me some examples of that? Abby Martin, on the other hand, I mean, Abby's a rock star. What are you going to do? The thing I love about Abby Martin, though, is that she explained her position. And if you know Abby Martin at all, if you follow her work at all, you know that she is consistent with the position she's taken on U.S. foreign policy, U.S. intervention, and she keeps that consistency in her statements about Russia. And that's what I appreciate. As a journalist, everyone has a point of view. Glenn Greenwald talks about this view from nowhere that journalists pretend to have, where they pretend they don't believe anything or have any feeling of their own, and they're merely reporting facts. That's just not true. It's all garbage. Any journalist who tells you that is lying to you. Exactly. Okay, but the more appropriate behavior is to explain your point of view so that people know where you're coming from, and then can determine, the validity of what you're saying. What I appreciate about Abby is that you know what her point of view is. She's against these kind of interventions, and she was consistent, whether it's U.S. intervention or Russian intervention, she was consistent in it. Huge respect for that.
I found what RT did very strategic when they came out and said that they fully support her independent views, which was great PR on their part of view. But I think it really shows the dynamic of how hard it is to be a journalist out there, because you either, one, have to take money from a government, two, a mega corporation that are intersected with the political parties, or you have to hack products at people and try to make them buy, anything and everything. So it's really difficult. I know you're fully independent, I'm fully independent. We do everything for free for the people out there, but it's really hard making it by. I mean, how are you sustaining, how are you doing, and where do you see everything coming in the future, especially with us being independent lone dogs?
Let me just say real quick too, before that, about RT, huge respect for RT and the fact that, like you said, they did support what she said and said, hey, she has the right to say what she wants to, and we're not going to control that, and then offered to send her to Crimea, which I know she said she wouldn't go, but said, we will send you there. I actually respected that too, because as a journalist, I'd actually like to go there and see it for myself and say, okay, that's where I'm basing it on. So, and I will say this, having been in broadcast journalism and corporate media for 15 years, to have a boss say, hey, you have the right to say what you think, it's very rare. Yeah. So appreciate them doing that. Yeah. As for the, being independent now, yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to make a living doing this. And part of the difficulty is that we don't have major sponsors. We have to rely on people. I mean, we crowdsource to get started. We've got our new crowdsource started on Indiegogo right now, which you can contribute. Go to benswan.com and contribute there. It's difficult. I mean, let's not lie about it. It's very difficult to do crowdsourcing. It's difficult to sustain that. You see these things like Veronica Mars movie that make all this money. Well, those guys have huge amounts of PR and marketing firms that are spending a lot of money to make that money, right? So when you're just doing it on your own, it's very difficult. And what we need are people to really stand up for and support alternative media.
It's really difficult because there's no one else behind us except you, the people out there watching us. Just a clarification, Abby also said she didn't go to Russia and the Ukraine primarily because she wanted to build her own contacts and not just be sent by RT and be established and them tell her what to do. So she's working on that as well. She was just on the Piers Morgan show. I thought what she did was really great, really courageous. I know it was ballsy. I know she was afraid of what she did, but she did it with commitment, and I think that's what really makes her stand out. And I think people recognize that. And once people could see that it's real and it's really happening, people have a better appreciation and respect for it. And I appreciate what you do. It's very well produced, very well documented. You do really good stuff. It's hard. I know it personally. It's extremely difficult. But I know you believe in it. I believe in it. And I wish you the best of luck. I know you're going to make it.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. benswan.com is the website. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Guys.